Hello everybody, welcome back. It is me, your old pal Orpheus, with another edition of the Madness and Mayhem podcast. Yeah, it's a chance for you to sit back, relax, put on some headphones, and just listen to me tell a little story and kind of enjoy this without really having to worry about any of the action in the background. I am playing a couple of games here in the background occasionally. You will see that. Gives you something to look at, but you know, it's really more about the story. And today, boy, do I have a good one for you. I used to be married to a woman before Mrs. Orpheus, and she was kind of a freak. Anyway, so we're going to talk about that today here on the podcast. Before we get started, I hope you are doing well wherever you are today, whether it is day or night, or you're just kicking back and you're listening to me, I don't know, on the back of a cruise ship. I know I've used that one before a long time ago, but it's a good place to listen to your old pal Orpheus. Okay, so let's kick things off today. Back about, oh boy, what was it? Almost 23, 24 years ago, maybe a little bit more. I was married to another woman. And this is an interesting tale because when I was working on the radio, we jokingly put out a little thing one morning that said, "Oh, Orpheus is single. Any girls that want to fill out an application, go ahead and fax them into the station now at whatever number," right? And so, of course, nobody responded for the first few days. And then one fax came into the studio, and you're like, "What's a fax?" Never mind. Ask your parents. So one fax came one fax came into the studio one day, and it was from this girl who, let's call her Sharon. So Sharon sends in this fax, and it says, "Oh, I'm a single lady here in town. I do this for a living. I'm really looking for someone who's nice and generous and loving and all that." And she says, "Oh, I'd love to go out on a date with Orpheus." And so we call her up and put her on the air and do a little interview like, "Hey, so tell us, how long have you been living in this town? What do you find interesting about Orpheus?" All that kind of nonsense, right? And so I ended up going on a first date with her. I don't even remember what it was. I think we went to a Big Boy. That sounds about right. We went to a Big Boy restaurant, otherwise known as Bob's Big Boy, if that's your thing. Don't ever look into the eyes of the Big Boy statue. It's cursed. It's like a creepypasta. Don't do it. Anyway, that little tangent off there, right there. But we started dating, and it was one of those things where, like, she was really, really into what I was into. Like, I'm into Star Wars and Doctor Who and sci-fi stuff, and I'm into going out in the woods and shooting some guns and, kicking back and just enjoying life. And, she was like, "Yeah, no, I'm totally into all of that. I love Star Wars. I love, sci-fi movies and stuff." And like, we'd go to her house and nothing. She had a huge at that point, VHS collection. And no Star Wars, no sci-fi movies. It was all like chick flicks and stuff like that. Like, 10 Things I Hate About You, that sort of movie. And so that was a little bit of an eyebrow raise. And when I'd go over to her house, her mom would be, her mom and her stepdad were like, oh, look, it's Orpheus. I'm so glad to see you. Oh, our daughter really likes you," and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, well, looking back on it, it was a little bit sketchy, like a little bit mid there. You're like, I don't know. And so, started dating more and more, started seeing her more and more. And, it really seemed like we clicked, but maybe a little bit too much, which is my point here. So we ended up, getting pretty serious. She moved in with me in my apartment in town, and I don't know, it really was kind of a whirlwind romance kind of thing going on. And so we go, when we were living together, this is a story I told in a couple podcasts ago about my first radio job. I actually lost my first radio job because of her. It goes deeper than that, though. Go back and listen to that episode if you are interested in that entire story. It has to do with a fast food restaurant and some coupons and then some bad checks. And that eventually ended up with me getting fired from that job. And so here's where we're going to pick up that story from that last podcast, right? Okay. So I get fired, and we don't have anywhere to go, right? There's nothing going on. She got, I think, fired from her job as well, right around the same time. And so we didn't know what we were going to do. Well, it turns out she had a cousin, a second cousin, who was living in North Carolina at the time. And that was a decent drive from where we were. We were in way northern Michigan. And her cousin, you know, they're on the phone once in a while. And she invited my wife and my ex-wife and I to drive down there and to live with them for a little while until we could get like our own jobs and stuff going on. And it was like, yeah, that seems really like that's a nice deal, right? Well, I was still a little bit like, I don't really want to leave Michigan. I don't want to go down to North Carolina. I don't want to move into a weird house that, you know, I don't know anybody, and, you know, they're your cousins and stuff. It's kind of a weird power play, right? So if things don't work out, suddenly I'm in North Carolina, and it's like, what the hell, right? I got to call somebody and get back into Michigan. Oh boy, here's where it starts to get weird. So they're on the phone one day, and my ex-wife now, gets off the phone, and she turns to me and she says, "Hey, I got something really good. I know you weren't really excited about going down to do this." And I said, "Yeah, no, I'm kind of not." And she said, "Well, here's the thing. I just talked to my cousin, and she says that we can have foursomes with her and her husband." And I'm like, what the hell are you even talking about? She says, "Well, you know, she's really attractive. He's really open-minded. And, you know, we're kind of open-minded." And I was like, we never talked about somebody else coming into the relationship. It was always like, you know, there's some pillow talk that goes on once in a while. You get a little bit dirty-minded when you're in the throes of passion, right? You say things and like do things that you might not normally do. You know what I'm talking about. Come on, don't act all puritanical on me. Anyway, so she was like, "Yeah, no, we can go down there and like we can have you know, like orgies with them." And the only thing going through my head is, this is your second cousin and her husband. Like, are you absolutely kidding me? Like, I know that we're getting towards the south with North Carolina, but come on, man. Like, what kind of weirdness is that? And she's like, "Well, she's not my first cousin, she's my second cousin." And I'm like, that makes no difference whatsoever. She's like, "Why not? It'd be fun." I'm like, we're going to be living with these people. Do you know how embarrassing and how awkward that would get outside of anything in the bedroom? She says, "No, I mean, it wouldn't be that weird. They're really nice people." And I said, "Okay, so here's the thing. We'll go down there and we'll move in with them, but I will not get into anything weird like that." Okay. So we pack up the car, we start driving, we get down to North Carolina, and it was at that point, there was one of the worst ice storms, snowstorms that had ever hit that area like in 100 years, right? This was a terrible ice storm. So the first couple of days that we're there, it was so frozen that the power went out. There was ice on all the power lines, so they had to, there was no power whatsoever, and had to stay in a spare bedroom. Oh no, you know what it was? It was their daughter's bedroom. Even worse. Did I mention the cousin had a daughter? Yeah, anyway. So it was their daughter's bedroom that they cleared out for us to stay in, and they put their daughter in their bedroom. Okay. So at first you think that's not too weird, you know, you're probably picturing that it's some younger kid, like a toddler or something. No, she was 10 at the time. So she's sleeping in her parents' bedroom. She would go to sleep, and her parents, the cousin and her husband, would sit and have in the bedroom with the kid there sleeping, quote unquote. They told her, oh, she'd wake up once in a while. We just told her we were massaging each other. We always used to make the joke that she's going to elope with a massage therapist at like 16. Anyway, so there was some weirdness going on there. We were staying there, and like the first few nights, just awkward as hell. I didn't know them. They didn't know us. I didn't really like them at all. Anyway, let's flash forward from some of the drama into I ended up getting another radio job. My second radio job ever. It was working on an AM station that was kind of sponsored along with a minor league baseball team, right? And so I got to go there to the studio, and it was, basically focused around that team. It wasn't like a sports talk radio kind of thing. It was news, but we did a fair amount of sports. Well, I was on the morning show for that, and I was the news guy. I had my own little soundproof studio. The DJ, well, he wasn't a DJ. He was the host of the morning show, would cut to me occasionally, and here's what's in the news today, that kind of thing. I covered a really big murder trial when I was down in North Carolina. It was, you know what, I'm not going to say which one it was, but let's just say I covered a big murder trial that a lot of documentaries and stuff have been done on this murder trial. I was there every single day for it. I ended up getting an intern who helped me with that. That was kind of cool, having an intern, because part of what I did was I worked for a station cluster. Now, this is pretty common in the radio industry. When you work for one station, if they have what are called sister stations, which are usually owned by the same company, you'll also do work for those guys too. Well, most of the time. And so I would do news and commercials and stuff like that for, I think it was 2 other stations. Now, my intern ended up taking over my job, and there's a reason for that. My ex-wife and I used to fight, and it wasn't, anything on my end. She was nuts. She probably still is nuts. Hey, ex-wife Sharon, if you're listening right now, screw you. You took away 12 years of my life. Not bitter, not bitter. Anyway. So I was doing my radio job. Everything was going great. I was really starting to advance quickly in the company. They had already given me a good raise within 6 months of me starting the job. And they had given me my very own cell phone, which back then having a corporate cell phone was a pretty big deal, right? Excuse me. And so I had this corporate cell phone. I really loved having that because it was like so convenient to carry that thing around. And the thing is, though, back then, cell phone usage was really, really expensive. If you think it's bad these days paying $120 a month for your iPhone or whatever to have a part of your family plan, that is nothing compared to what it used to be. $120, that was like 2 weeks worth of use, and that was like light use. You got charged by the minute for most cell phones, right? And so I was very, very strictly told by the company, this is only to be used for business purposes. No long distance phone calls, no texting anybody, and texting back then was like alphanumeric, right? So you'd have to hit the buttons, so it was a keypad and you hit the number 2 twice to get to B, you know what I'm talking about? That kind of thing. And so I had that thing. Pretty neat, right? But my ex-wife kept going like, oh, can I call my mom real quick? It'll only be a 5-minute phone call. Oh, can I call my friend back in Michigan? It'll only be a 5-minute phone call. Well, these were sort of the things that we would argue about, right? I would go, no, look, we can't, I can't just let you make a phone call on this. And she'd go, well, you don't care about me at all. I can't even get in touch with my mother, and my best friend has heard. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. Just use the phone. Just keep it to a couple minutes. It shouldn't be a big deal. She'd take the phone and go off and do like a 2-hour phone call, right? And so I kept getting warnings from the company, like, do not let this happen. We're seeing these charges come up. Don't worry about it right now, but if it keeps happening, we're going to have an issue. Probably have to take away the cell phone, stuff like that. And I said, okay, I will really try to get that curbed in. And so I would tell my ex-wife, please don't do this stuff. Well, one night we had a big fight, and I don't remember what it was. You know what? I have no idea what the fight was about, but it was in the middle of the night, and I used to go into the studio for my regular shifts at 4:30 in the morning at the latest, I think, was most of the time. So it was like 4 o'clock in the morning that I would get to the studio. You got to be ready by 5:55 in order to start the morning show, and so that gave me enough time to get things lined up, type up some news, do a little bit of research, maybe line up some of my interviews for the morning, things like that. Well, so we had this fight. She didn't let me go to sleep. Because you got to imagine waking up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to do your job. You have to go to sleep at like 6 o'clock at night, like 6 or 7 o'clock at night, or else you're just going to be wrecked, right? You're delivering news for people. You can't just be in there like, and so also in the news, dude. You can't just do that stuff, So I don't even remember what it was, but she wanted to stay up and fight about something. It was probably about weed, honestly. We used to fight a lot over weed. We would get something from somebody, and she would smoke too much during the day, and then she'd get mad at me because we didn't have enough later. It was really weird. Whatever. Anyway, so we got into this fight. I don't remember what it was, like I said, and I ended up going, look, screw it. I'm going to go to the studio right now. It was like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I am done with this. I'm going to go to the studio. You know what? If I get into a crash on the way to work, I don't even care. It was I said something along the lines of that. Well, she was like, no. And I hopped in the car and just sped off, right? So I'm in the studio. I had keys to the building and everything, so I let myself in. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And I'm doing my work, and I hear on the window, because I had a window that faced the outside. It was like a double pane glass window, but if someone was knocking on it, you'd be able to hear. And so I'm going, and I hear right? I hear this tapping on the window, and I look over, and it's 2 cops, and one of them is tapping on the window with his ring. He's got this big, huge ring on, and that's actually what I'm doing. He had this ring on, and he was banging on the window, and he's got his flashlight, and he's shining it in at me, and I'm like, what? Like, what's going on? And they signal to the door, and I'm like, okay. So I go over, and I let him in. And they're like, are you okay? Are you safe? Is everything all right? And I go, what the hell are you even talking about? And he says, well, we got a call from your wife, ex-wife. We got a call from her, and she said that you were going to hurt yourself, that you were going to crash your car intentionally, and you were going to try to hurt yourself. And I was like, so why are you here? She says, well, because she was really concerned about you. And so they started asking me questions. So they're like, oh, do you have your ID on you? Okay, have you done this? Have you done that? Like, do you work for these people? I'm like, obviously I do if I'm in here doing news. It wasn't like I was just some homeless guy that broke in, right? I was wearing a shirt and tie, right? And I was actually like, typing away. I'm sitting there typing away on my keyboard when they banged on the window. So I was like, what, you think some robber broke in to do a little bit of late night office work? And I was snide as hell. I was so sarcastic with them because it was like, look, I just got into a fight with my wife. I just got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. I came down here, and apparently she called the cops. Come on now. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to have to report this. Why are you here so late? And I'm like, because I do morning show, and I'm just here a little bit early, and I just needed to get out of the house. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And they're like, well, this seems a little suspicious that you would come all the way here just to get away from your wife. Why didn't you just go for a drive or something? And I'm like, because a drive is not constructive at all. I mean, like, I have this job. The more time I spend at it, the better my job is. So, may as well. So here's where it got bad. The 2 cops decided to call my boss. Yeah, it was like 1:30 in the morning, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and my boss did not work the morning show. He was someone who came in at like 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and so they woke him up at like 2 o'clock in the morning to tell him that their news anchor for this radio station was in there after having a fight with his wife, and they had to come down and file an official police report, and would he come down to sign the police report as the owner of the building? Well, as you can imagine, my boss was not very happy, and he came down in like basically in his pajamas, like it was sweats and a t-shirt. He was so pissed off. He had to sign that piece of paper, and they were like, okay, it's good, you can go now. And he's like, you woke me up just to come down here and sign a piece of paper, and now I can go, right? Well, yeah, that's all we need. So the cops leave. My boss looks at me and he says, I want to see you first thing in the morning after your show this morning. And I'm like, oh man. So because of all that, my boss ended up firing me. They laid me off, as it were. They decided to call it getting laid off instead of getting fired. And the funny thing is, my wife was epileptic, or still is, I assume. That's not like something that you grow out of. Anyway, it was getting harder and harder for us to get her medication for anti-seizure stuff. And so 2 weeks before I got fired, we got married so she could be under my insurance. Well, joke's on her. I didn't have insurance 2 weeks after we got married. Oops. So anyway, that is the story of the second time that I got fired from a radio job, and some of the weirdness that came from my ex-wife. Yeah, there's way more to this story. We will cover it as a kind of chronicle going on. This is considered chapter 2 in that. And I hope you really enjoyed that today. I hope it kept you entertained for a little bit of time here. Let you unplug from your regular life and just get into the weird and wild life of your old pal Orpheus. Anyway, treat yourself well because you deserve it. And I will see you on the next episode of the Madness and Mayhem podcast right here with me, your old pal Orpheus. Bye!